Hi guys, welcome back aboard good old Athena. In this week's video, Ava starts her open water certification and I want to get our dive compressor up and running. I foresee plenty of glorious scuba diving in our future. My name is Mess, this is my wife Ava. I've spent the last 5 years on a somewhat extensive refit of our 1987 Warrior 38 named Athena. That was a DIY fun-packed adventure complete with a very extensive osmosis treatment, building a new rudder using vacuum infusion, rebuilding the entire deck, gutting and subsequently rebuilding most of the interior, painting the topsides, and a ton of other projects. The summer of 2021 we started cruising full time. Now we're finally ready to begin our adventure. I've been scuba diving since I was 15 and this is a photo of me a few days before my 15th birthday in a very ill-fitting wetsuit about to do my open water certification in a pool with a little bit of ice on it. Now that we're here in the Caribbean, hopefully diving will be a little bit warmer and also a little bit more colorful.
As Matt said, I have my first open water dive today. I'm very excited. I had my first contained dive in the pool the other day where I learned all my skills, and my instructor said I was the best in the class. I was also the only one in the class, but no, it went really good. It was a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to today.
I am so excited to be able to share scuba diving with Ava. It'll be really amazing for the two of us to be able to do that on the boat with all of the gear there and the dive compressor and just be able to dive as much as we want to.
Yeah. And originally we were going to have Mads teach me because he's a dive master, but we thought maybe it would be best if I did it from an instructor just because it's important to focus and really learn everything well.
Yeah.
So.
I'm not saying Ava doesn't listen to me, but there are some times where maybe
selective listening.
Just a little bit. Athena's back there, and I think we're meeting the guy in there.
I called around to a few companies, but we ended up going with my excellent instructor, Philip, with 2 L's, at Reefers And Wreckers, because he came highly recommended by a few other cruisers in our anchorage. Oh wait, is that a mermaid? Oh no, it's just me clumsily trying to control my buoyancy underwater. It's a tricky thing, that buoyancy. After having somewhat gotten a hang of the whole buoyancy thing, we headed out along the breakwater, which is actually a pretty nice dive spot for just being a breakwater. And to be honest, it was so cool, I kept getting distracted by all the fish and kept forgetting to focus on my buoyancy. So, sorry, Philip. As a part of the certification, there are certain exercises you must master, like for instance, the terrifying task of flooding and emptying your mask, and yet more wretched buoyancy exercises. Uh-oh, looks like the cameraman got distracted by the fish too. Here I had to remove my BCD underwater, and as you can see, my gear got a little bit tangled, but I calmly and coolly got it untangled and was able to complete the exercise. Once again, the cameraman getting distracted and missing my sweet skills. After a successful dive, we headed back to the beach.
Ava did really well during her lesson and I'm proud of her. Now, buoyancy is something everybody struggles with in the beginning, and there is only really one cure for that struggle, and that is experience, experience, experience. I think Ava's doing slightly better than the average open water student I've come across, so yeah, maybe 2 or 3 more dives and I think she'll really start to nail the buoyancy. Speaking of my lovely wife, she has paddled ashore to the beach for some well-earned R&R and left me alone here in the sweat lodge. It is currently 33 degrees Celsius, or I think that's low 90s in Fahrenheit. That is basically as hot as the surface of the sun for a pasty white guy from Denmark. But still, I would really like to get our dive compressor up and running. Ever since I decided that I wanted to go long distance cruising, this is 10-12 years ago, I was always hoping that diving would be a big part of that. So the very last thing we did before leaving Europe was to pick up this dive compressor. Now, Athena is fitted out for 220 volts, which is normal in Europe, but I figured it'd be easier to get a dive compressor over there than once we get over here in 110 volts land. This particular dive compressor is made by a company called Coltri in Italy, and it's the model Icon. As you can see by the electric motor here, we've opted for the electric version rather than the gasoline-powered version. I think going electric makes a lot of sense for us because we already have a decent size inverter that's more than capable of running this dive compressor, and in case we get some overcast days, we also have a diesel genset. Coltri as a company, at least in Denmark, doesn't really have as good of a reputation as something like Bauer, but the two companies don't really share the same price tag either. If you compare something like the Coltri Icon with the Bauer Junior, which I'd say those are two somewhat comparable models, the Icon is about half the price of the Junior. And we're not trying to run a dive center here. We're only ever going to be filling our own 2 tanks. So I'm hoping the Icon will give us many years of faithful service. As you may have noticed, there are a couple of "for the love of God, remember to do this before starting" these stickers on the dive compressor. There's one for oil here, and then there's one for a filter cartridge. Fortunately, I have got not only a bit of oil here, but also a couple of filter cartridges. I've flipped the dive compressor around to show you guys that there's a little sight glass in here. According to the manual, I think we need to add 0.6 liters of oil. The anchorage is a tiny bit rolly today, so I've just made myself a little funnel out of a piece of printer paper. According to the sight glass here and also the dipstick, we now have enough oil. The only other thing I need to do to be able to crank this baby is to put in the filter cartridge. There's only room for 1 filter cartridge in the compressor, but I got 2 of them because I didn't know how easy it was going to be to find replacement cartridges here in the Caribbean, and you do need to replace these from time to time, so yeah, I picked up 2 of them. The cartridges comes in little vacuum packs, look like this, and they also have a little indicator on them that will tell you when you need to replace them. This blue stripe here is that indicator. That'll change color as the cartridge gets used. Cartridge goes in and the cap goes back on. The version of the Icon we've got here is the bare bones entry model without any kind of fancy bells or whistles. You can get some good add-ons. You can get like an automatic condensation drain, auto stop, stuff like that. But there is one accessory I wish we had, and that's the official suction kit. The suction kit makes it so that you can move this little guy here. This is the air intake filter and the intake away from the compressor. I think it's about 3 meters long or something like that by default. And yeah, I wish we had that add-on. The reason I wish we had that accessory is because the dive compressor is going to live here in the technical compartment. The technical compartment is not a dirty space as such. It's just from time to time we get a drop of diesel or a drop of oil in there, and it'll be best not to draw air from that area. And seeing as we don't have the official suction kit, here we have a bit of a cruiser's fix. This is thanks to Mario from last week's video because he drove me around to some hardware stores, and thankfully here in Barbados they have a weird mix of both BSP and American thread when it comes to plumbing and stuff. So we were lucky enough to find some BSP threaded fittings here, a couple of hose clamps and a bit of hose. The hose is an extremely tight fit for these fittings, so I use a little bit of hot water to soften it up, got it smushed on there and secured with a couple of hose clamps, and ta-da! Suction kit, Cruisers Edition. I think the very last thing we need to do is just to connect the DIN to yoke adapter, because as you can see here, the compressor comes with a DIN doodad and we need it to be a yoke doodad. So we get this on there, then we should be ready. Because this is our inaugural flight, I'm gonna run the dive compressor here on the kitchen island where I can keep an eye on everything. I've got the tank connected over there, I've got the compressor hooked up to power, and we've got the air intake here strapped to the boom. This is gonna be a little bit loud, so good thing it's almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't think anybody's sleeping anymore. It looks like we're sitting about 2,000 watts. The tank was almost empty. It's a 10-liter tank, so let's see how long it'll take to fill. I can definitely hear the dive compressor outside of the boat here in the cockpit, but I wouldn't say it's super loud. Now with the compressor actually working, it seems like we're sitting at 2,800 watts. We're coming up on 8 minutes, so let's get the first bit of condensation out of here. We're at the 10-minute mark and we're already at 110 bars. Oh, so we're at 21 minutes, 38 seconds, and we're sitting at a comfortable 220 bar, or just a hair over 3000 psi. That's it. This is our first ever home-filled tank here aboard Athena. That's pretty cool.
It's a week later and I just finished my scuba certification. Woohoo! I'm so excited about it. The only thing is, immediately after I got a horrible ear infection. I was hoping it would just like last that day or the next day, but it is very persistent and is not wanting to go away. And I'm really upset because I really wanted to take you guys on a dive of the wrecks in Carlisle Bay, where I learned it is so cool, but not with this ear infection. We have me on amoxicillin right now, which came all the way from Denmark. And even though the island has a really good healthcare system, we used what we had on the boat. That's why we have it. And this is, you know, the doctor before we left Denmark, he explained this is the exact scenario we should use them for. So yeah, we thought we would use it. So hopefully once this gets all cleared up, we will be able to take you on a dive to some wrecks.
I would love to test out one of our two tanks to see if the dive compressor has done a good job. But I'll hold off on diving on that wreck until Ava can join me. So instead, I can show you something kind of interesting about our copper coat. Some of you guys might recall that only a few months ago I copper coated the rudder for the wind vane, and that is absolutely spotless. There's not a single piece of growth on there right now. The rest of the hull was copper coated back in Denmark in 2018, and we do have some growth there, even though I scrubbed the hull lightly only 2 weeks ago when we first arrived to Barbados. I don't think I can really fault the copper coat for this growth, because I've done a little bit of a test on the rudder, as I'll show you. But yeah, let's jump in and take a look. As you can see here, the wind vane rudder is completely free of growth. It's actually doing better than the sail drive and the prop that has different methods of anti-fouling. Now for the little test area on the rudder. If you look up from down below, it's very visible. There's this small area here with zero growth. I scrubbed that area as hard as I possibly could after noticing the growth after having cleaned the hull 2 weeks ago. As you can see, there's just a soft loose film on the rest of the rudder, but nothing on the test area. I think that means the rest of the hull just needs more scrubbing to expose a little bit more copper from the copper coat. That is easier said than done though. It is hard work. But it's not so bad on the rudder because I can grab onto the skeg and apply pressure to the scrubbing pad that way. I also gave the rudder shoe a quick cleaning to inspect it for corrosion, and in a bit of really good news, there is absolutely no signs of corrosion on the rudder shoe after our last haul out. After yet more rigorous scrubbing with a brand new Scotch-Brite pad, I decided to take a little break and check on the anchor. Other than the chain being right on top of this old mooring, the anchor is perfectly set in the sandy bottom. On the way back to the boat, I spotted these two guys casually having lunch right next to Athena. Anywho, back to the cruiser's version of mowing the lawn. Before calling it a day, I checked on our sail drive. As you can see, there is more growth on the sail drive and the prop than there was on the wind vane rudder. The sink on our sail drive was mysteriously loose and wobbly. It's not supposed to be like that. I removed it and inspected the drive, found no damage, so I bolted the sink on again nice and tight. In a rare bit of awesomely good news, the air in the tank was perfectly fine. The dive compressor did a really good job. Now, to top my tank back up, I tried running the dive compressor inside of the technical compartment. The dive compressor does generate a lot of heat when it's running, so I stuffed our big giant box fan in there to keep the compressor somewhat cool. Of course, I placed the air intake out in the cockpit, and because it's a nice sunny day, we were able to top off my tank using only energy from the sun, so no dinosaur squeezings was used. In the category of slightly annoying news, there's the sink on the sail drive. I have no idea why it rattled loose. I'm pretty sure I put Loctite on there when I replaced it back in Spain, but yeah, it must just have rattled loose. Now, there are still some areas left on the hull where I need to do the harder scrubbing to expose some copper, but I think I'll save that for the next couple of weeks to spread out the exercise a little bit. Now that we have Mr. Dive Compressor up and running, there is no end to the amount of scuba diving we can do. I am so excited to get back into scuba diving and to be able to share that with Ava, and it would be really cool to start doing some underwater photography or video stuff that I've always wanted to do, and now we're here somewhere where it actually makes sense. And also I would kind of like to start dabbling into some technical diving, although our dive compressor here is not going to help us with that, because that usually means diving with gases that are a different composition than regular old boring atmospheric air. So yeah, but the video stuff underwater, that will be really cool to get into once we get some gear that can actually shoot high quality video underwater. In next week's video, we have a big decision to make, because we need to decide if we're going to go north or south for hurricane season. There are pros and cons to each, so it's kind of a difficult decision, but we'll get back to that next week. Also, we have an issue with our lithium battery that's getting so warm that it's refusing to charge, so I'll have to see if I can get some air flowing over it or something like that. And I believe Ava is gonna show you her new hobby of yogurt making. So yeah, we hope to see all of you guys back here at Botatina next week for yet more fun. So as always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video,
Please remember to leave a like. Wow, you're gonna do it without me?